Hey, everybody. Well, today I'm doing an episode on the WHO Pandemic Treaty. And I found the PDF document and I'm going to start going through that page by page. But first, I'm going to give you guys just a little introduction to what I know or what I've been learning so far. Again, this is Ernie Racing News, February 23rd. So let's get into it. So mainstream media is not covering the pandemic treaty, the WHO pandemic treaty at all. In fact, only a few news stations are covering it, and these are those little guys that are also still getting funding, and they're pushing about, oh, this is a great thing, this is great. But otherwise, the big media is staying away from it completely and just leaving guys like Ernie Racing News and everybody else just independent news to get the story out, and you guys, right? So make sure you hit that like button, share button. It helps us beat the CensorTube's shadow ban algorithm with the likes. So the WHO, who funds the WHO? Well, number one is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The amount of money that comes from that group, that Bill Gates Foundation group, is the largest investor. And so, which immediately ties them to this biopharmaceutical complex. You know, that's what Bill Gates is investing in, all the pharmaceutical companies and anything, and from water to anything he can get his hands on to our farmland. But he's right in the biopharmaceutical. And he's laid out plans for the next pandemic. He's openly talked about it. In fact, he wrote a book about it. Right? These guys these evil doers, the guy that Inspector Gadget's always fighting against in the plane with his cat. These guys, they don't hide. They enjoy it. They laugh in our faces about it. So note, you got to note Bill Gates is intertwined with investments in the WHO. So essentially, Bill Gates is the WHO to a certain degree, just like the person that owns the most of a business has controlling interest, right? Now, what the pandemic treaty is, like a lot of people have been asking, well, what exactly is it? And I got a lot more studying to do, but we'll go for the main points. It's a way of creating a control mechanism, a world policy for total control for the next pandemics. The next pandemic, it gives them control. It's like handing over, here's all the keys to my country and to all the people, and you guys take care of us now. And we'll be better off, right? And before, the WHO has always been like, we recommend you do this, we make recommendations there. And now we know these recommendations for the globalists and for the Trudeaus and the Bidens and the Macrons and these globalists, these WAF affiliates, we know that just means like, this is an order. This is what you're doing. This is what you're doing, and you're working with us, so you're going to listen. And we're all working together to reset the world and take everybody down to destruction, and then we can reset from there and have a small little population and control it like an open air jail, right? It's essentially an order for all the Democrats and liberals because they are us. Now, the WHO wants a more universal policy. They want to have a policy for the pandemic that's unilateral for all the countries that they can get to sign up for it. And we all know the WHO policy, the policies that they instigated in the pandemic over these last 3 years. Well, we all know they haven't done anything but bad. And again, back to George Costanza, if you do the opposite, if everything you do is inherently wrong, then the opposite must be inherently right. So that's how we've always taken it. Just read the Google YouTube COVID-19 misinformation policy, and then apply the George Costanza, do the opposite tactic, and you'll kind of find your way through much better. And of course their policies have been terrible, but the WHO policy, it's bought and paid for. It's not about humanity, but specifically it's about money, power, and control, right? And that's how you rule the world. So who are we receding control to? for the next round of any kind of pandemic, to an organization that is unelected, an unelected group of people who have a terrible track record with the first pandemic. Often, you might remember that one doctor, whatever, is Borlaug or something, sounds like an exhaust. We know him, and then all of the underlying people that are just nobodies, it's just the WHO, are making these decisions. We didn't vote for them. They don't have any interests of our interests in mind. And there's no accountability. None. And that brings you into it when it's proven that they did things wrong on purpose. Well, who deals with it? If the U.S. and Canada signs up on the pandemic treaty, which is in 4 days, by the way, I think it was February 27th, they're voting on this, 4 or 5 days. And we all know Biden's already in. We'll get into that a little more. He's already said it's just ready to go. I'm just ready to sign it. We, or these leaders, these Democrat leaders, are signing over the way that they can define, create, and control the next pandemic. And in these rules, they have several stipulations throughout the document. And just to give you a quick summary of it, it's number one, they give themselves the power to define the next pandemic. There's no questioning them when they say this is the next pandemic, this is it. There's no, and it puts everybody in the one lump too. This is back to the Elon Musk thing, is the fact that if everybody does the same response to an actual pandemic, whether it's instigated or not, and it's all wrong, then the whole humanity falls. But when everybody does their own little thing in all these different groups, if several of those groups fall, the rest that did something different have a chance to live, and then it continues with then humanity lives. And that's why it's good to have different ways to deal with something, because you're putting all your eggs in one basket. But again, back to number one, they give themselves the power to define the next pandemic. Whatever you want to call it, whether it starts with S or starts with a P, right? Number two, they get to determine the lockdowns. We've already seen how the lockdowns have been pushed, and we all seen the basis of them to push the lockdowns. Of course, on CensorTube, we won't go into all the details, but essentially, it's pushing control. Essentially, on YouTube, on CensorTube, you just can't say anything on YouTube that counters what the HWO says in their policies and the CDC policies and your general health, local health policies. You can't say anything that contradicts those, but of course you have to wait for them to update them or be forced to update them, based on, it's so well known that they have to update something, and they have made some updates, right? In terms of the vaccines, I gotta be very careful I say this, they updated about transmission. Okay, and so we continue on. So give themselves the power to define the next pandemic, determine the lockdowns, surveillance power. They give themselves ultimate world surveillance. They can come in, you sign the treaty, they have your surveillance, they're surveilling you, and that can go right down the money chute, the deep pit. Number three, they have the vaccine mandates. They can mandate the vaccines. You need the WHO vaccine. If you don't get the WHO vaccine, well, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to use extreme coercion at the minimum, if not just forcefully do something against your will, because the police force would be controlled and by the government, which is then signed over the control to this WHO group of individual evil doers. And number 6, the vaccine distribution. They get to determine how they distribute the vaccine and what countries, what areas, and which ones get a good vaccine or a bad vaccine. Who knows, right? Number 7, vaccine IP and profits, the intellectual property and profits. They control all that, and they determine who they just keep funneling the big companies, the Pfizer, the Moderna, the etc. They all just keep record profits. And we'll get into that later. There's actually in their little policies, it only recommends that they work together, the vaccine companies or private companies. It's only recommended, but we can force the mandates on you, of course, and everything else. Redistribution of everything is the final point I'm going to talk about. They have the ability to redistribute property and land. That's right. So They can come in and say, well, we need your land. We're going to use it for whatever purpose. They don't even maybe need to give you a reasoning in the deep details. It's so vague, right? So this is so far they published version 0, they called it, or something like that. We'll get into it more. Now, they have the right to seize land. They have the One Health surveillance. So this is a quoting from their system. One Health surveillance. Well, that sure sounds scary. You can only imagine, and there's no definitions of this yet. That we don't have any information on these definitions. It's just they keep it super open. One Health surveillance. They'll surveil you in the hospital to all your procedures, all your vaccines, all your drugs. And the next one is inter-pandemic. What does inter-pandemic mean? Well, they'll make that up as they go, I guess. Inter-pandemic. One Health surveillance. And then another one that's insane. Infodemic. Infodemic. Don't know anything about it. Infodemic. And, then they have another one, recovery. Again, some loose definitions. Understanding and controlling every drop of information. That's what they're doing with this interpandemic and infodemic. Understanding and controlling every drop of information. And along the way, they absolutely know any crack in it. And so they're trying to, by doing this, they're trying to limit those cracks. They're trying to stop the Janine Smalls from speaking to the European Pandemic Investigation Commission. So they don't have that where all of a sudden Janine Small, who is the president of Inter-Country Communications, Travel, Distribution, or whatever it was, isn't on oath asked about when they knew about transmission for the vaccines. I've been publishing the video of Janine Small and so many videos on this channel. So if you haven't seen it, please write in the comments saying I haven't seen it, and then I'll make sure to post it again. And I add it to so many videos. You can't really talk about it on CensorTube because you do get like a flag to a strike, to a suspension. And I appealed it once and actually won, which is the only appeal I've ever won in the entire time of dealing with YouTube and misinformation policy and COVID information policies. But so you got to be careful when you talk about it. It's easier just to when I show the footage of Janine Small, YouTube doesn't bug me on that. But when you talk about it, then they kind of get into the finer details. Well, what did you really mean? What were you really saying, right? It's flagged for manual review. Okay, where the hell was I? So understanding every drop of information, and they're going to try to limit all the cracks, to limit their problems in control. And then when you think maybe it'll be a two-way street, this WHO pandemic treaty, like they're going to take all our rights and freedoms, but maybe they're actually going to do something useful with it, in supporting the global fixing an actual pandemic, right? The sharing, okay, so here it is, the sharing clause between pharmaceutical, private companies, pharmaceutical, whatever company they be, and them sharing information and working together, sharing information with each other and making vaccines, as an example, during and in a pandemic. So we're in a pandemic. We have companies. Why don't we have them share the information to get a result quicker to save people, as opposed to proprietary control of how they can make money against each other and who has the bigger pie, right? So that's not the case at all. In fact, they had some recommendations in the treaty. We encourage, they use the word encouraged in their language. The sharing between pharmaceutical private companies to support each other in making vaccines during and in a pandemic. It's encouraged. It's encouraged for private companies to work together and share info to help create vaccines. Yeah, I'm sure that's going to make anything happen. We already know what massive profits these companies, Pfizer, Moderna, make. $100 billion Pfizer made in 2022. And 45 billion of that was specifically from the vaccine for COVID-19. It's 45 billion in 2022. And then 100 billion overall with the company profits. I mean, what is a billion? How many trillions is in a billion? How many millions is in a billion? How many thousands is in a billion? Start thinking about it. It's giant. Now, a million millions, right? I don't. Oh my God, 1,000 millions is a billion. Yeah, I think that's what it is. I don't even think that big. Yet I do have a big and open mind. Now look at the big picture again. Speaking of big pictures, we have a group of individuals that's controlling the countries who are signed up for this WHO pandemic treaty. Which is Biden in 4 or 5 days. I'm sure Trudeau, and now Brazil. Since the Brazil, like the government, whoever was the head of Brazil, there was a video of him a long time ago. Talking about the PCR test and talking about papaya. If you didn't see that. I can't mention any of this on here though, but you make the connection. And they're giving up all this control, this unelected group again, right? Let me find where I was. So, and when they said something or tell us something, what is to be done anytime, what is our recourse if we disagree or they're absolutely blatantly wrong on purpose, like usual, right? Who do we take to court? In Canada, are we going to take the WHO pandemic treaty to court after it's been signed into the treaty? Is the USA courts going to apply anymore? No, there is nobody to complain to. There's nobody to take to court. You've taken away the full democracy. There is no democracy. Not that there really was ever a full democracy, but you're taking away the illusion of a democracy. We can't just give up science. Preventing people to what we can study and what information we can gather that actually push and pull. The actual push and pull, which is science. If you didn't know, science is always about pushing and pulling because there's always improvement or disagreements. And then you need to debate and concur and look at again. And things are always discovered later on and improved or found out to be false. Cigarettes are dangerous. What? Now, Biden spoke about joining the treaty here when he's going to sign it in 5 days. And there's no discussion. There's no reading of the bills. Where's the first, second, third reading in Parliament? What about the Senate? Is the Senate going to read the bill? Nobody's even read it. Nobody's read it, guys. There's no discussion. There's no definitions like I went over before. What the hell? What's the definition of interpandemic and infodemic? One health surveillance. Like, how do you sign something so general, right? Well, we know why, but there's reason Trump withdrew from the WHO. Do you guys remember Trump pulled out of the WHO, and I don't remember the rest. He pulled out of the other agreements, the Paris Accord or whatever else it was. And back then, years ago, I didn't understand any of it. I didn't watch any political news, any government control news before the mandates were announced. Honestly, me, Marcel, Ernie Racing News, not one bit cared. I didn't know who to vote for. I used to vote, back when you could first go to vote, you're in high school living at home, and then you have the ability to vote. And it's like, well, who should I vote for, Dad? And my dad at the time, way in the whatever it was, in the late 90s, he was voting for Liberal. And then I'm like, okay, I think I went and voted Liberal with him twice. And then later on, he's like, oh, we're voting NDP now. And I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I'll go have some fun and I'll vote NDP because I'll exercise my right to vote. This is how stupid politically I was. And this is the rest of the liberals out there. I was in the hot tub last weekend and there was a couple in there. And these kids are like 20 years old going to university. And I asked them, I'm like, just out of curiosity, do you know about the Emergency Act public inquiry? And this is when the final result, from Judge Paul Rouleau, the liberal appointed judge by Trudeau. And he was appointed a judge by Liberal back in the day. And he was a, astounded Liberal. It's very public. And they're like, Emergency Act public inquiry, final report. I don't know anything about it. And I'm just like, do you know what the Emergency Act is? And they're like, oh, yeah, I know. I know the Emergency Act, something to do with the truckers, right? And so this is the extent of knowledge. And then I gave them a crash course real quick about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Human Rights Act and about free speech and how it's being, we have no free speech anymore, how it's censored, how we're being censored and how the coercion works with the mandates. And then I explained to them about Janine Small, the president of distribution for Pfizer intercontinentally, about how she admitted on oath about the transmission. And I'm like, so all of the mandates were based on that all of the vaccine mandates were based on one big lie. And I explained this nice and slow, and it seemed like they understood, but they weren't shocked at all. They weren't like, oh my God, what? They were just like, oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I'm like, doesn't this make you upset that, well, I could already tell they from the way they reacted, I would assume they're vaccinated 100%. I would bet on it. It's like red or black. I would bet. What do you call it? Red for vaccine. Snake eyes. That I didn't explain anything about dangers or anything. No, we need to get into that. But I explained about the mandates. Like, so people couldn't go to restaurants. People couldn't go to gyms. People couldn't enter their country without this blasphemy of ArriveCan and testing. And yet somebody who was vaccinated could just go right on through. Or you could just go walk over the border in Quebec, and claim asylum, and you're all good, right? In fact, they'll give you a hotel room and feed you and give you full medical health care and the ability to vote for Liberals again to help you get more people over. Well, now I'm getting off topic. I'm ranting a little bit, guys. But this is kind of like a podcast, Ernie Racing podcast here, whatever it is, Thursday night, 7:52 p.m. So let's keep going. So Trump withdrew from the WHO. Good for him. Now I understand why. And then you have Biden, who's loving the treaty. See, I think Biden and these Democrats and the globalists and the WHF involvement, the guys doing the full world reset, the treaties actually give them power. And we don't have any vote on it. And just look at Biden's already done with Ukraine. Nobody voted on what the USA is doing in Ukraine. Nobody voted on a war of NATO versus Russia. Nobody voted on the Nord Stream pipelines being blown up. So you have this crazy amount of power, and it's just, and there's no stoppage, there's no control mechanisms, like when the nuclear weapon, the click, open the key, couple keys, open the box, set the nuclear weapons off. Well, Biden has all the keys. That's the problem. And so the signing is on the 27th of February. So there you have 5 days, guys. Man, the world doesn't even know what the hell is going on. 5 days. Where's mainstream media? Well, we all know. The public didn't even see a page of it. Unless you're like me and you go and look for it. Oh, man. So we need to be scared of the power in their hands. What can or would they do or will they do? Well, we know they'll do the worst. Well, you didn't get your WHO vaccine. You didn't get your WHO approved vaccine, right? And it's mandated, right? So we're not giving you your money. Your bank accounts are frozen. Your driver's license is suspended. You can't renew your insurance. Whatever coercion may be, if not worse, right? Again, these unelected individuals. Oh, there's Philip. Let's just give him a second. He made me a latte. This is my second one today. I'm breaking my own rule. I try to do one a day. Okay, so he's done now. Philip, good job. There are no safeguards about this with the pandemic. They declare the pandemic. It's their pandemic. To be blunt, ironic, it's their freaking pandemic. They control it. They do it. They make it. So, guys, again, smash that like button. To help push my YouTube shadow banning channel. The shadow ban videos push into the algorithm. If you don't hit the like, nobody else will see this. It's because it's shadow banned. 2 million days. I went on 9 p.m. when the Emergency Act was voted on in Parliament, which was the February 21st last year, 2022. 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, my videos went from 100,000 views per hour to 5,000, and now we're pulling in. Not very many. A lot of videos don't even reach 1,000 views. When you could post a video and within 10 minutes it used to have 50,000 views. So smash that like button. Get us hopefully pushed into the algorithm. You see, the likes is the only known way to beat the censorship algorithm. And this has been shared by several YouTubers to work. And I've seen it also. So some videos just get tons of likes and it'll push out, and then all of a sudden from 500 views it can jump up and get 2,000, 5,000, and so forth. A lot of the real Canadian cowboy videos from like last month had that. So I'm gonna take a break, and then maybe we'll do another video, and I'll start reading out the pandemic treaty to you guys, because we got 5 days to go over this. So again, Marcel Ernie Racing News, February 23rd, 7:55 p.m. guys. Thanks for watching, and be afraid of the WHO.